Hey guys, welcome back to Portal of Wisdom. I am back today with another story for you, and if you are new to the channel, like and subscribe and click that little post notification bell, and you will get alerted when I post new videos. And if you have any other video ideas, you can let me know in the comments. And now on to today's topic. So, today's topic is quite a bit of true story with a little bit of speculation or urban legend at the end. And being an Arizona resident, this is one that does probably hit a little more home, one that I've heard about here and there. Been to the Grand Canyon a lot. This has to do with the Grand Canyon. So in the early days of the Grand Canyon, when it first became a national park, and even just a little prior to those days, people tried to navigate the canyon, and not a lot was known about it. So there was a honeymoon couple in 1928 that tried to float and navigate the canyon, and they wanted to do it rather fast and set a speed record and stuff like that. So the couple we're talking about, their names are Glen and Bessie Hyde. And they had met on a passenger ship that was heading to Los Angeles in 1929, and they fell for each other on this ship. And Bessie was in the middle of getting divorced, and that still had to get finalized before Glen and Bessie could get married. So they got married on April 12th, 1928, and I believe that was like the day after her divorce was final. So they got married in Twin Falls, Idaho. That was where Glen was from. At the time, I believe he was 29 and she was like 22. So Glen was an expert boat builder. He's from Idaho. He grew up in Idaho. He had floated and navigated the rivers up there, the Snake and the Salmon rivers, and he decided that with his new wife, they wanted to float the Colorado River. And in October of 1928, Glen built a 20 or 22-foot wooden sweep scow boat for the adventure. And he was a very good, expert boat builder. So he builds this wooden sweep scow, and I believe they started in Utah on the Green River, and then they floated into the Colorado River, and they wanted to continue on down the canyon and eventually come out at Needles, California. Of course, this is before Lake Powell and before Lake Mead, before those dams had been built or anything like that. So it was possible to float all that way. And anyhow, Bessie was I believe she was a college graduate. She wrote a lot of poetry. She was very well spoken. She was going to keep a detailed journal of this whole trip. And I believe after this trip was over, she would have been the first female to navigate the rivers, navigate the Colorado River, and Glen wanted to do it faster than anyone else had done it, so they would both have a bit of media prowess if they were able to accomplish this feat. And I believe Bessie's journals were meant to kind of chronicle their travels down the river and hopefully be able to, I guess, probably get some money from all the media and hype and attention and stuff like that they expected would come as they could finish this trip. So they started in October in 1928. They float down and they make it right around November 15th or 16th. They stopped at Bright Angel Trail, which is where they met the brothers Emery and Ellsworth Kolb, and they operated a cliffside photography studio in the Grand Canyon, like in the national park where the main part of the national park is today. So they had a photography studio there. And they used to take pictures for people. This is in the 20s, so not everybody had a camera or whatever at those times. So they took pictures of people at the Grand Canyon, and I believe they had a boathouse down on the river and everything too. And they were very good boatsmen also. So Glen and Betsy, they come up the trail, they introduce themselves to the Kolbs, and kind of go over their details of their trip so far. I believe at that point they had been on the river for 26 days, or a combination of the Green River and Colorado River. So Emery Kolb takes their picture and talks to them a bit about things, and they intend to come back after they finish their trip. They intend to come back and get the picture that he has taken and would have developed at that point. So Emery, though, was very worried because Glen seemed to be very almost overconfident. He didn't have any life preservers on board, and of course he had a lot of knowledge and everything when it come to running rivers and everything that he had done in Idaho. But he seemed a little overconfident, Emery thought, and it also seemed that Bessie was a little bit nervous and hesitant at this point. So I don't know if at this point, if, they've been through some rapids and stuff on the river, but there's a lot worse to come. And I don't know if Bessie was thinking maybe this was a little too much, or they bit off more than they could chew, and Glen didn't want to admit that maybe it was a more arduous journey than he had expected. But nonetheless, they push off from the Kolb studio, and I believe they had another gentleman that hopped on board with them for a day or two, and was then dropped off at another trail location. And he's the last one that's seen them alive. But by early December, when the couple had not been heard from, Emery Kolb, he started a search that included a small plane. So the pilot managed to see their scow, their boat, snagged on some rocks, where, when they got to the boat, they found everything was neatly packed inside the boat. It seemed like everything was secured, like their food, clothing, books. Even Bessie's journal was in there. The camera was in there. And I believe there was a pistol in the boat. And anyhow, so they determined from the film, once they developed it, of course, when they find the boat, they don't find them anywhere around there. So the Kolbs take the camera, they develop the film, and they determine that the last picture was taken probably about November 27th near River Mile 165. And the Kolbs studio where they had stopped is about mile marker 88, I believe. So they left the Kolbs studio, they go down river for quite a few more days, they make it to River Mile 165 for sure. And anyhow, that's what they knew at this point. So Glen's dad hires a search party. They search all over the canyon, think if they happen to get washed out of the boat or something, where might they hike out, and they look at all these details, and for months nothing turns up. So this is where some of the theories and legends started. The first theory was that Glen was an abusive husband, and Bessie got tired of it, and she murdered him and hiked out. So his friends and family, they don't really buy that story. They say that Glen loved Bessie, and they were, on this trip. He had never been abusive before. He wasn't known as an abusive person. And another theory that was speculated was similar to that. It said that Bessie shot and killed Glen due to his abusive behavior, and that she later became a rafting guide named Georgie Clark that had been a rafting guide on the Colorado River for many years. And the reason that this theory gained some steam is because after this rafting guide, Georgie Clark, died in 1992, and she had been a rafting guide, I believe, for about 45 years on the river, her friends who had known her best, they'd known her for decades. They had never been allowed in her house, and they always felt like something was a little bit off, and they couldn't quite put their finger on it. So her friends are going through her house, and they find a birth certificate that indicates that her name was really Bessie DeRoss, not Georgie Clark or Georgie White or Georgie anything as they had known her. So they thought this was mysterious, and they're looking through more of her personal effects. They find a pistol in her lingerie drawer. They find the marriage license for Glen and Bessie Hyde. So this, to a lot of her friends, kind of put the pieces together, and they really believe that she was Bessie Hyde. But there are other people that say, you know what, she was a guide on the river for 45 years. I'm sure she heard the story lots of times. Maybe she wanted the marriage license, wanted to request it and have it as a souvenir or something of those sorts. So no one really knew for sure. But a lot of people thought, no, she didn't look to be the same person. So in 1971, on a commercial boat tour in the canyon, an elderly woman named Elizabeth Cutler, she spoke up and had mentioned they're sitting around the campfire at dinner at Diamond Creek where they had beached, and she mentions at dinner that she is Bessie Hyde. And I don't know if the story was being told and she spoke up. I think that's what happened, and she spoke up and said, well, I can tell you what happened. I'm Bessie Hyde. And the woman then went ahead and said that her husband was abusive throughout the trip and she didn't want anything to do with it anymore. And she said she stabbed him and she left him for dead and she hiked out of the canyon to start a new life. So this guide that had been told the story kind of looked into things, and I guess they dug into who she was and everything. They determined that she had been a college professor of psychology, and apparently she liked to tell stories and stuff. But she also, when she was confronted again, she denied ever saying anything at this campout. So then people thought, well, if you really were Bessie Hyde, you probably, if you kind of slipped and mentioned some things you wish you wouldn't have, you probably would say that, I don't know what you're talking about. So, and that is what she said. And when they looked at her, they kind of determined that she was about the right height. She had the right facial features and other features, and they thought that she could be Bessie Hyde, but they couldn't really determine for sure if she was. Also, with this woman, Elizabeth Cutler, she had a daughter born in March of 1929. So if she was Bessie Hyde, she would have been pregnant on this trip, and she was a newlywed. Bessie was a newlywed at that point. So if she was, it's not a stretch to think that she could have been pregnant and been, 4 or 5 months pregnant, whatever you would be at that point. And some people don't, some people say, well, you don't show a whole lot, and not everyone does at 4 or 5 months pregnant, and that could be the case. So no one really knows, no one knows that for sure. But I guess if that was the case, and she was Bessie Hyde, and she's pregnant, and you get those pregnancy hormones going and stuff like that too. So some people have thought, well, maybe she was, but no one could ever prove that one way or another. So there was also some speculation around Emery Kolb that he had maybe killed Glen, as after he died in 1976, a body was found in his boathouse in a canoe in the boathouse, and the skull had a bullet in its head. And people thought for a while that this might be Glen Hyde. But it was later determined that this person had died no earlier than, I believe they said 1972 or so. So it was definitely not Glen. Even if it was earlier than that, it wasn't 1928. So they said, this made him appear a little bit shady or funny or whatever, but it was also said that he was on the coroner's inquiry for the county, and he may have brought a body home. There was like a body that turned up that was unidentified, and I don't know, it doesn't make sense why you would bring it home, but some people thought that that was where it was from. So anyhow, it wasn't Glen. So really, when it comes down to just some of the details, what you have, you know that the Hydes visited Emery and Ellsworth Kolb around November 15th to 18th, somewhere in that time frame, depending on which story you look at. That's River Mile 88. Last photo was taken about River Mile 165. There is evidence that they made it to Mile 225, Diamond Creek, and camped there. And there is a large riverside beach, and easy to dock a boat there and camp there, and it's still done today. And Bessie's Journal did mention this place. And I've been down there just recently too, and it does appear to be a very good stopping point for camping and everything too. So, anyhow, and it still is today. So people believe that they may have been lost on mile 232, that's now named Honeymoon Rapid, and I believe that may be named after them. But not much was known about it in 1928. But this rapid in this area has wreaked havoc in the canyon, and I believe that they say this spot, there's a couple of what they call killer fangs sticking out of the river on the side, and I believe the current takes you to that side, and they stick up out of the water, and you can be pitched into the water there. And I've seen some videos of people that nearly capsized there. So, it seems like that could be a spot you hit a rock and maybe the boat doesn't capsize, but it jars enough and you fall in the water and you're swept downstream. Anyhow, the boat was found at mile 237. So it's found about 5 river miles down the river from there. But the weird thing is everything seemed to be in perfect order. Nothing was broken or nothing like that. It didn't capsize. All the effects were secured like they should have been. Just the only thing missing were the hides. So it was trapped in the river at mile 237, I believe, completely upright and intact, but against a couple of rocks or so. And when they found the boat, they found there were 42 notches carved into the boat's gunwale, which, if they were notching one notch per day, then it corresponded to November 30th, the last day that was also written about in Bessie's Journal. So around this time also, downstream from here, I believe a prospector had said he saw a brown leather jacket floating down the Colorado River, but he wasn't able to get it. It was out in the current or whatever a little bit more. And Bessie was known to wear a brown leather jacket on the trip, and I believe there's pictures showing her in that. So we don't know. But there's people also that say that Bessie was very well educated and wrote poetry and everything, and they said that Georgie was barely literate. So a lot of people say that they don't think Georgie could have been Bessie. So when it comes down to it, I don't know that Georgie was Bessie. It doesn't seem like it. There's a possibility maybe that, in 1971, when Elizabeth Cutler said that she was her and then recanted her story, I guess there's a possibility there because her height and features and everything did match. But I don't know. It's one of those things. They might have drowned. Most people think they probably drowned. I don't know what your thoughts are. If you do any research on it, there's a lot of stories out there and a lot of details. It could be pretty scary to be on the river, and if one of the parties wasn't really all about it anymore and was scared and just wanted to return home and the other one didn't, I mean, you could see how there could be a fight, could be a situation that could have happened, and I don't know, maybe it led to foul play, and maybe someone did get hurt or shot or stabbed and someone hiked out of the canyon. But if doing so, Diamond Creek is a reasonable place to be able to get out of the canyon, although they would have been just a little past Diamond Creek. But I don't know. What are your thoughts? You can let me know in the comments, and like and subscribe if you like these kind of stories.